Hello, sinners and saints. It is I, Emily Sophia, aka Mighty Sophia, here to break down for you guys the latest episode of American Gods. We are on Season 1, Episode 4, which is titled Get Gone. So, spoiler alert, before I dive into the bad thick of things, as I shall be endeavoring to bear all in this review, and just FYI, I have in fact read the original novel before, so I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but I'll also say that pretty much everything that happened in this episode is off the book, so I'm not really gonna even be able to get into any spoilers, so you don't have to worry about that regardless. But just adding a little context for this review, and this review is also going to be different from some of my previous recaps in that it is unscripted and I didn't actually really take notes during the episode. I just really wanted to sit and immerse myself, so inevitably there are going to be details that I'm going to skim over or aspects of the episode that I'm not going to directly discuss. So the burden falls upon you guys to bring all of that stuff up in the comments below, and I am trusting you to do it because I know all of you people in the internet world are very vigilant, and I'm sure that there's things you're gonna want to hash out that I don't get to here. So just be gracious and keep the conversation rolling down yonder. And without further ado, let's get into business. So I'd say this episode is the most narratively clear. I was gonna say cohesive, but I think that the previous episodes, I mean, they're very diverse in terms of content and the different subplots that are being woven together. But it is nice to have an episode that's a little less demanding in the cranial department, like you're not bending over backwards to try to understand what it is you're seeing, but nevertheless, I think that the visuals remain very creative and beautiful and engaging in this episode. But yeah, what's really crazy exciting about Get Gone is that this represents the first time since Neil Gaiman's inception of American Gods that we really get to know who Laura Moon is. Because she is a pretty powerful and important character in the novel, but she isn't utilized nearly as much as she could have been in the original story, because honestly, American Gods, the novel, it's so sprawling and expansive, and there are so many different characters and deities that Neil Gaiman introduces us to that, frankly, there isn't enough time to spend with Laura in the original text, in those pages. So to get to see her come to life in this context is such a huge deal, and I hope that it's a huge deal even for those of you who haven't read the original novel, because she's freaking badass, and it's great to get to know her. Sobering as well, because goodness, that woman has got a trouble or two, but it's just incredibly powerful. What's also really brilliant about this episode and the show in general is the fact that they're taking the character of Audrey Burton and expanding her in directions that the book didn't even hint at. And that's, I mean, through no fault of Neil Gaiman's. Again, he had a lot of characters in his hand, and he had to pick and choose who he wanted to tell his story with. And as for Bryan Fuller and Michael Green and company, they decided to take these two female characters and really breathe fresh life into them, really flesh them out. And that's so freaking cool, because the original novel is a little bit of a sausage fest. There are some female characters. One of my favorites is yet to come, and I'm positive that she's going to be a part of the show. I'm not going to say anything about her yet. And Bilquis was also kind of a presence. They're in media, of course, too. But generally it was way more male character centric. And so here we are getting to really get into the psyche and the background of Laura Moon. And honestly, I still have questions about how this woman works and like what's going on in her life. But I think that this episode did a really good job of bringing us up to speed on who she was and now who she is. Because this show is nothing if not about miraculous transformations, and that's something that Laura Moon gets to experience, and even Audrey by seeing Laura again. The last thing that she would have expected in the midst of her turmoil and grief. But yeah, so lots of fabulous actors and actresses in this episode. Of course, we get the petite and lovely and feisty Emily Browning as Laura Moon. Betty Gilpin, I believe, is the name of the actress portraying Audrey. And she was, of course, in, I believe, the pilot episode. And I thought that maybe that was going to be a one-off thing. And even what happened between her and Shadow at Laura's grave, like, none of that was touched on in the book. She was a very one-note character in the novel. And so everything that we get with her is just such a pleasure. I feel I'm not terribly familiar with her body of work, but I feel like she's a really good comedic actress. In a sense, there's something about her manner that is just so engaging and funny and earnest. And that really, really comes through in the context of this very dramatic supernatural show. And I really dig that. I think that she's a fabulous addition to the story, and I hope that this is not the last that we've seen of Audrey. And then as Robbie Burton, of course, we have Dane Cook. And I remember that was a very controversial casting when that was announced, I think a year ago at least. But I think that he fit the role perfectly. There wasn't a ton that the character of Robbie had to do. And he functioned perfectly for the story and for being, you know, the other man. I think he did really well. He's not crazy sympathetic or unsympathetic. He just is. He is a man who is caught up in Laura's web of self-loathing and resentment and sadness. He comes into the fray. They kind of both take advantage of each other, and it grows into something more for him, more so than it even seems to for Laura, and that's really interesting to watch unfold. We also get to see two gods from the Egyptian pantheon, one of whom we were formally introduced to last week. We got Mr. Jackal, aka Anubis, who is played by Chris Obi. And then we also have Mr. Ibis, played by Demore Barnes, I believe it is. And I spoke about both of those gods in my previous American Gods review, so if you haven't seen that and you want to hear more about them, then you can go back and check out that video when you get the chance. But yeah, it's really cool now that we get to see the funeral parlor that the two of them operate. This is a very different introduction to these characters than what we got in the novel, and I think it works perfectly in that it's being interwoven with Laura. I think what's so cool is to see how Fuller and Green are taking these pieces of the original story and kind of crafting this Frankenstein's monster of a show. And I'm not saying that it's completely unnatural and heinous and monstrous. It's just they're making this work, you know? They are patching their own dazzling quilt of many colors together, and I am super down to snuggle up in that quilt when it's all stitched up and done. Which, that's kind of what we're in the process of doing, watching these episodes week by week. It's it's really marvelous, but and also, a special aspect of this episode that I want to underline is the original song, Queen of the Board, which is by Brian Reitzel, right? I'm not exactly sure how that's pronounced, and Shirley Manson of the band Garbage, or Garbage. It's really, really good, and I think it perfectly epitomizes the disgruntled, nihilistic version of Laura that we get to see unfold on the screen. And I do have some of the lyrics that I scrawled out here on my computer. It's unlucky for you, I'm the queen of the board, and I'm like Cleopatra, I get what I want. And it's fun that they have that little Cleopatra reference, of course, being that there are a lot of Egyptian themes interwoven in the episode. But to continue, I lean in, but then I check right out. I don't flinch because it doesn't hurt. And what is God if there's no one there and there's no proof that you ever cared about me? It's pretty dark, grim stuff right there. But yeah, the whole leaning in and checking out is basically Laura's relationship with death. It's a little bit touch and go, and there's a certain pervading numbness to her character that's really sad to watch. But I think it's valuable to see a woman portrayed in this way. I mean, it's not outright stated that Laura is suffering from a mental illness, although of course her inclination towards suicide and suicidal behaviors would suggest that that's a possibility. But yeah, I think it's really meaningful to see this woman who is clearly struggling and completely disenchanted with her existence still pressing on and stubbornly refusing to let go of what's in front of her. It's a really interesting paradox that we find her in, and I'm super excited to explore more of her in that regard. But yeah, so moving on to the second verse of that song, it says, I fuck with the fates because it's so much fun and I don't feel a thing because I got so numb. And then it goes back into the chorus with slightly different lyrics. It leads up to, and what is God if there's no one there? And what is God if there's no proof? There ain't no proof, you got no proof. And that parallels really nicely with Laura's conversation with Shadow, a little bit of pillow talk about the afterlife that they share. And we see that Shadow's kind of, he's more agnostic in his beliefs, I guess. Or at least in the sense that he doesn't know, and he supposes that maybe there's a possibility, but it's kind of beyond them, right? Whereas Laura is somebody who grew up with all of the stories and religious narratives, and it sounds like she was introduced to a lot of different stuff, like not necessarily just I was raised in a Christian household or something like that, but then eventually she started reading history. Always a terrible thing to do, but also good if you don't want to repeat it, and starting to find that what happened in the world, at least from her perspective, didn't align with all of these fairy tales, essentially. Yeah, and so she's very much in the atheistic end of the spectrum, where her belief is that once you die, you are dead and gone, from dust to dust, and basically just left to rot. And that's not exactly what happens to her as fate would have it, but again, she is messing around with those. And I found it really fascinating that, of course, the very fact that she got to interact with Anubis and in the scales, the whole weighing of the heart ceremony, that's something that the book didn't even get into, and just shows how Neil Gaiman provided us with all of these cool characters, and their stories interweave and interlock a lot more so than we ever would have thought. But yeah, when it comes to weighing her heart against that feather, she's like, look, I'm gonna make it easy on you. This is not gonna balance out. But I wonder, is it her act of defiance in that way that compels Anubis to condemn her to eternal darkness and nothingness? Is that what she was gonna get anyway? Is it the fact that she was so resigned to the idea that there's nothing good waiting for her, or that, you know, she screwed up so much in life? Like, I don't know. I'd be curious to see your thoughts about that. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. But yeah, so that song I think was really good. I got to hear it before the episode aired today, and thought it was pretty compelling. Gave me kind of an idea of the type of Laura that we were going to meet we don't really get to know who Laura was before the accident and before her return to the flesh in the book. So this is all new stuff, and I think it adds a way richer context for everything that's going to unfold between her and Shadow in the days to come. But yeah, so let's talk about some more specifics of the episode. Something that I really enjoyed was, of course, the Egyptian theme, not only the little Cleopatra reference in the song, but the fact that Laura is working as a dealer at this Egyptian-themed casino. That's something that's very prominent, because when we begin the episode, all that we can see is this mural, and we see this woman and the way that her hair is styled and her headdress. It makes us think that, oh, maybe we're going back to some coming to America or pre-America little vignette, but that's not what's going on at all. As the camera pans out, we see, okay, we are definitely already in America, which of course has a lot of venues that dive into the exoticism and that kind of thing. But then, of course, we also have Mr. Jackal and Mr. Ibis, who are themselves Egyptian gods. So that's something that's really neat. And I wonder, too, sorry, this is kind of another aside, if Laura was introduced to Anubis and Mr. Ibis's god, or any of those Egyptian stories, because Anubis was saying that the manner of her death allowed him to intercede after her soul was released from her body. And so I'm just kind of curious as to the logistics of that. Maybe we're gonna find out more. I don't know. I'm just shooting the shit. But anyways, yeah, I think that was a really neat little undercurrent there. So let's also talk about some of the important symbolism in the episode, namely the hot tub and the Get Gone bug spray. So Laura's hot tub, of course, is not just a means by which to escape from the daily stresses of life, as many people would use it, but it is, to her, an escape from life itself. It's basically a steamy coffin, this conduit to the afterlife, or from Laura's perspective, just the after, period. And then meanwhile, the bug spray is not just a means by which to repel pests, but a means by which to expel herself from the land of the living. And it also foreshadows her zombified return, after which point her slowly decaying flesh starts attracting the flies that once danced on the periphery of her sad, bitter life. And in a sense, honestly, she's kind of dead on arrival. You know, she's been dead long before getting violently flung from Robbie's car while giving his nether regions a spectacular send-off. Yeah, so I think that the way that the bug spray and the hot tub were used in this episode was really fascinating, and the fact that when Anubis was essentially sealing her fate, he was leading her to that same hot tub, the same darkness into which she tried to send herself before, but then she starts flipping the script and rejecting the idea of that darkness. And then to see how in life she's going around killing flies and even trying to achieve that same effect with herself, sadly. And then later the flies are coming to her anyway because she thwarted death. And there she is, back and better than ever. I think she's better in the sense that now she gets to approach life from a whole new angle. She goes from wanting to end it all to, oh, my cat is here. Thankfully, my cat did not die, unlike Laura's cat in the episode. And now she's gonna go cry in my room, but I'm not going to let her out until I'm done with this video. But anyways, so another thing that was really awesome about Get Gone is getting to see all of the parallels between Laura and Shadow, I think, was really valuable. And getting to also finally understand, too, that what happened in the Valley of Bloodshed and the destruction of Technical Boys thugs, that was all Miss Laura. And I love that, because originally we were thinking, okay, did Shadow tap into some latent power? Like, is this attached to his own godhood or something? But as it turns out, Laura just pretty much became One Punch Woman. But anyway, so the parallels between their characters, which I thought were really cool. So just as Chernabog has Shadow's head, soon to be served to him on a silver platter and knocked out with a hammer, Anubis intends to deliver Laura into darkness. So there are these two gods who are basically trying to seal their fates, even though they're just getting started. They're just at the beginning of their respective journeys, and now their journey together. And then also, just as Shadow was liberated from prison early, Laura was liberated from eternal nothingness, at least for the time being. I don't know. Who knows if Anubis is going to change his mind, you know. Now he remembers her, so it's going to be perhaps a bit more difficult for him to proceed as he originally intended. And yeah, so Shadow and Laura are both on a collision course with the gods, as Shadow got in the way of Technical Boy's schemes, just as Laura challenges Anubis's authority on matters of life and death, things in which he considers himself to be pretty well versed. And she comes from this atheistic place of like, what is this crap even? Like, what are you gonna do? And then, whoops-a-daisy, magical leprechaun intervenes, and she's out of the picture. And Shadow may have lost Laura in life, but Laura has gained Shadow in death. Talk about a second shot at love. It's pretty cool stuff. I was really tickled to see all of that unfold. So, yeah, and to get to see Laura go all One Punch Woman and brutally punch Technical Boy's lynch mob into Bloody Kingdom Come, that was pretty fantastic, and she's able to spare Shadow from his premature execution. And she also hid in the hot tub when Shadow came home after his acquittal to pack up his belongings. So it's fascinating that she's able to perceive him as this radiant life force. And it doesn't necessarily seem that every living person is portrayed that way. It's that Shadow alone takes on this new life and magnetism. And she's able to pursue that now that she's trying to navigate this this afterlife on Earth. Heaven really is a place on Earth, I guess, but she doesn't exactly have the heavenly body thing going for her. She's able to get a little bit of medical attention to kind of slow the pace of what's already taken place, but yeah, so that's all pretty crazy. I just love that the show hid that knowledge from us of what Laura was really up to and her role in saving Shadow's life, and then finally lets us in on the secret. I think that is very enjoyable, especially for book readers who think that they've got a sense of everything, but maybe not exactly. So not only is Laura back in the flesh, her relationship with Audrey is finally fleshed out in full. These two women definitely have their not-so-sympathetic traits, Audrey being a, quote, vulgar woman in whom death, grief, and betrayal have coalesced into a pretty nasty little cocktail of rage. And then, of course, we've got Laura, in whom bitterness, grief, and resentment have coalesced into the motivation to sustain a deadly affair with her best friend's husband. Flawed though these women may be, their attempt to patch things up with each other, and even Audrey's attempt to help patch up Laura, it really humanizes them. They're able to come out on the other side of the umbrella lie, and its morbid climax is two broken, multi-dimensional individuals with a better understanding of themselves and the nature of their rather twisted and fantastical reality. Audrey's able to overcome her hilarious hysteria. That whole exchange between the two of them, the linchpin of the episode for me, my absolute favorite piece. But yeah, so she's able to get over that, hiding out in the bathtub, and opens up to her very own Judas, who's painfully passing embalming fluid in the toilet, and then later gives her a lift to her post-mortem cosmetic appointment after performing a little makeshift reattachment surgery herself. And Laura's able to own up to her actions, something that she wasn't prepared to do with Anubis, and journey back to the man for whom she was not able to wait back when she was a regular old mortal woman. This time, she not only waits, but seeks him out, drawn to him like a moth to a flame. And it's funny how Shadow said that in the previous episode that he didn't believe in love until he met Laura, but Laura didn't believe in love until she nearly met her maker. And now she is not only the one chosen, but the one who chooses. She's no longer resenting Shadow's happiness. She's just trying to make sense of things and really own things for herself. And it's fun that Shadow is still her puppy, but not in the sense that he's a pet. He is someone that she can protect and finally be the woman that maybe she really wanted to be for him. But yeah, all in all, I think just a stunning episode. There's so much more that I want to learn about Laura, but the show is inevitably going to be a vehicle through which we can do that. So I hope you enjoy my breakdown, or that you enjoyed it past tense. Let me know your thoughts, things that stuck out to you that you thought were interesting. I know that probably some people are going to complain that they didn't show the theft that Laura and Shadow tried to pull off together, but I think ultimately it turned out okay. They focused on what they wanted to, needed to. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. I will be back next week, maybe doing a Twin Peaks review. I don't know yet, but we'll see. So you guys, please take care of yourselves. And as always, I'll be back before you know it.